I'm Homer Knott from 6 Mile Creek in Tampa, Florida. And I was just sitting here thinking about one time back when I was a kid in the 70s. My grandfather asked me if I wanted to go hog hunting with him. Running the hogs is what we did. Now my grandfather, he was a pretty he was pretty much a scoundrel. He divorced my nanny ma when I was probably like 2 years old or something. I don't remember them ever living together. But anyway, my granddaddy, he was always out there in the creek. If it had a coochie, he wanted it. That's the way he was. And so even today, sometimes I run into relatives of mine. I didn't know they was relatives until I look at him. I go, man, that guy kind of looks like the family. And I check, and sure enough, he's like a cousin or a second cousin or, something like that. So anyway, enough about what my grandfather was like. But anyway, we went down to Ruskin into the Palmettos, and there was an old camp down there, an old shack, had about, I don't know, 3 bedrooms or 3 or 4 bedrooms, something like that. I can't remember. And there was a bunch of us there, and there's my grandfather and this guy named Bob, I think, and I can't remember all of them. But anyway, we was there, and we went out the first day. We was running the hogs with the dogs, and the way you hunt hogs with dogs is the dogs chase down the hogs, and then you catch up to them, and then you do what you got to do. So anyway, we had been out there all day and we was all tired. We came back to that little shack, that little cabin or shack or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't much. And everybody knew that old Bob snored. He snored so loud that nobody could sleep if they were in the same room with him, or hardly nobody could. But there wasn't enough bedrooms for everybody, and each room had a little two cots in it. So they decided to divide it up because we were going to be there a few days and just take turns on who was going to sleep with Bob. Well, the first night slept with Bob, and the next morning he gets up and he comes out for breakfast, and man, his eyes are red and he's just all dragging around. It looks like he ain't had no sleep at all. And everybody said, "What's wrong with you?" He says, "Man, I didn't get to sleep at all last night. I stayed up all night just watching Bob. He was snoring so loud." So we went ahead and hunted that day. Then that night we all got back there, and it was the next guy's turn to sleep in the room with Bob. And so the next morning he comes out, and same thing, eyes all bloodshot. He looks like he ain't had a wink of sleep. We said, "What's wrong with you?" He said, "It's Bob. He snores so loud, I thought it was going to raise the roof on this here shed." And so, anyway, he didn't get no sleep either. So then we went out hunting again all day, and came back that third night, and it was my granddaddy's time to sleep in the room with Bob. So my granddaddy went in there. My granddaddy, he had a reputation for being a ladies' man, and he was, even though he was a scoundrel, he was a pretty wise old man. So anyway, he went in there, and next morning he came out, and my granddaddy looked like he was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And everybody looked at him and said, "Look at you. You look all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Didn't you have trouble sleeping in there with Bob?" And he goes, "No, I slept like a baby." And they said, "Well, how'd you do that?" He says, "Well, when it came time to go to bed," he says, "I went over there and I tucked old Bob in. I patted him on the butt and I gave him a kiss. And Bob stayed up all night watching me." Oh, you just don't mess with those wise old men.